afternoon, and welcome to Live Impact News right here on 13 News Now Plus. 1:01 p.m., January 8th, Thursday here, still in that first month of 2026. And our coverage today continues the same way that our coverage yesterday began, and that is with the shooting in Minneapolis, an ICE officer shooting and killing a 37-year-old woman in the city of Minneapolis yesterday afternoon. We covered it through the duration of our stream yesterday, and again, we start our coverage today on Live Impact News on that same topic. We're not going to waste any time. We are headed out live to officials delivering remarks at the scene of the shooting in Minneapolis. Concurrently, you see crowds gathering around that official from a sky view, and also we have a White House press briefing on the way with Karoline Leavitt and Vice President J.D. Vance. Vice President Vance has been extremely vocal on X about his views on the shooting. There has been a sharp divide between federal officials and local officials when it comes to how this shooting is viewed. That is something that we will dive into as our coverage continues here on Live Impact. For now, let's go live out to Minneapolis, where officials are delivering remarks at the scene. Okay, so as you likely can tell, we are having some audio issues with that particular feed. We're going to work to get that fixed. We're getting a clear audio into our studio, but it is not going out clearly over our stream. But again, these are officials delivering remarks at the scene of the shooting in Minneapolis, and you can see the crowd that has gathered around those speakers from the aerial view that we have in Minneapolis as well. Now, we are still waiting for the White House press briefing to begin with Karoline Leavitt and Vice President J.D. Vance. We did hear from Governor Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, earlier today. Those are some comments that we are going to prepare for you now while we try to figure out how to get the audio fixed on this live feed right here. Now, Naya will give me a thumbs up when the Tim Walz audio is ready. In the meantime, I want to relay some more information that we have learned about the victim in the ICE shooting yesterday in Minneapolis. The victim, Renee Good, was a graduate of Old Dominion University right here in Hampton Roads. This is something that we learned overnight, and certainly is something that any time that you see an event like this happen elsewhere, it is shocking, it is tragic, it is devastating to witness. But then there's always something that kind of makes it hit closer to home and sort of makes those impacts feel as though they are right in front of you rather than in another state or even in another country in other instances. In this particular instance, we learn that Renee Good is a graduate of Old Dominion University. I am going to read a statement now from Old Dominion University President Brian O'Hempill that was sent to 13 News Now last night. It is with great sadness that Old Dominion University mourns the loss of one of our own, Renee Good, a proud monarch who graduated in December of 2020 from the College of Arts and Letters with a degree in English. Following Renee's tragic killing early in Minneapolis, our thoughts and prayers are with her family, friends, loved ones, and the Monarch Nation. This is yet another clear example that fear and violence have sadly become commonplace in our nation. Indeed, this tragedy reflects the deep strain being felt in countless communities across our nation. As citizens, it is our duty and right to call upon leaders and officials to restore civility in all facets of our lives, especially at the hands of those who are entrusted to protect and serve. May Renee's life be a reminder that what unites us, freedom, love, and peace. My hope is for compassion, healing, and reflection at a time that is becoming one of the darkest and most uncertain periods in our nation's history. That, again, is Old Dominion University President Brian O'Hempill, a statement that he sent to us last night regarding the fact that Renee Good, the victim of this ICE shooting yesterday, a 37-year-old woman, was a graduate of Old Dominion University. She was also the winner of the 2020 ODU College Poetry Prize. So that is information on the victim, more information on the victim that, again, makes this feel even closer to home, that makes this feel even more impactful right here in Hampton Roads, though it is something that all people across the country have felt as they watch that video and as information comes out about this instance. Now, as is so often the case in our country over the last whatever period of time, it's hard to necessarily discern, but there can be division when it comes to major news like this. When it comes to any piece of information, it seems as though there can be a division that takes hold, and that is certainly the case with this particular situation, at least when it comes to the thoughts and statements of elected officials. On the federal side, when it comes to the Department of Homeland Security, when it comes to Vice President J.D. Vance, who again has been very vocal on X about this situation, the statements about the incident are far different than those that have come from Mayor Jacob Frey in Minneapolis and Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota. Mayor Frey, for instance, saying in his press conference yesterday, this was an agent recklessly using power that resulted in somebody dying. He also used very strong language in telling ICE to get out of Minnesota. Now, when it comes to the Department of Homeland Security, and when it comes to Secretary Kristi Noem, the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, the statements have taken a different tone, or at least a different examination from what we can tell of this particular incident. Instead, describing the officer and the actions that were taken by the officer in a very different way. I'm pulling up the Twitter page now so I can read a little bit more surely to you those statements from those various officials in this particular situation. Here we have a statement from Secretary Noem from a press conference that she gave yesterday that we may have time to look into today, in which she says, describing the actions of the driver and the victim, Renee Good, she then proceeded to weaponize her vehicle. The ICE officer, fearing for his life and other officers around him, fired defensive shots. He used his training to save his own life and that of his colleagues. Again, that is Secretary Kristi Noem, a federal official from the Department of Homeland Security, and I'll juxtapose that once more to Jacob Frey, the mayor of Minneapolis, who says this was an agent recklessly using power that resulted in somebody dying. You can see the differences in those two statements, the dichotomy that has taken hold between how federal officials are seeing this situation and local officials are seeing this situation. Now, we have Governor Tim Walz' press conference from earlier today. Before we go to Governor Walz' press conference, can we once more just check on that Channel 2 feed and just see if maybe there's been any improvements in the audio while we've been going over some of these details? Let's just once more check that feed very quickly here. Okay, still no audio from what we can tell on that video. So instead, we will go to the comments from really just before we came on stream. This press conference went up almost right until 1 o'clock with Governor Tim Walz and other officials. So let's go to those comments now. Again, this is the governor of Minnesota, former vice presidential candidate, Tim Walz.
Minnesota, I say thank you. There's strength in numbers. There's power in peace. And what we saw was a beautiful vigil to a life that we're starting to learn more about. And I will let those that want to push out false narratives, to slander or defame Renee Good, Minnesotans will tell her life story. Minnesotans will be there to defend her honor and see this as a human being, not a moment in time or the callous casualness that I've watched some people on TV gloss over what they saw. We've also spent a lot of time talking last 24 hours about accountability. That means no function of government operates with impunity. It means when someone's in a position of authority and they commit any act that impacts our people, there has to be another place to turn to get justice, checks and balances. Basic idea, the center of the formation of our country. It's the only measure that protects us from the abuse of government or federal overreach or tyrannical government. Yesterday, the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, the BCA, spent the day yesterday attempting to get that accountability. We have learned that the Trump administration has now denied the state that ability to participate in the investigation. And I just want to make this as clear as possible to everyone. Minnesota must be part of this investigation. These are nonpartisan career professionals that have spent years building the trust of the community. There's a BCA Force Investigations Unit that was created by the legislature, by the people of Minnesota, to provide an independent, consistent, and trusted mechanism for investigating the use of force incidents involving law enforcement officers. Minnesota has seen our share of these. And what you've seen is, and I have witnessed it during my time, that these professionals have risen to the moment. They are trusted by people. People who are not by inclination trusting of law enforcement or government have come to see the professionals at the BCA as true arbitrators that can get them justice. The unit is the result of years of scrutiny, public engagement, and bipartisan legislative action. Minnesotans have made it clear time and again they expect transparency through this process where a police officer uses deadly force. The BCA, Commissioner, Superintendent Evans, have earned that trust by delivering on that expectation. I think it's clear to everyone as they saw this that it feels now that Minnesota has been taken out of the investigation. It feels very, very difficult that we will get a fair outcome. And I say that only because people in positions of power have already passed judgment, from the president to the vice president to Kristi Noem, have stood and told you things that are verifiably false, verifiably inaccurate. They have determined the character of a 37-year-old mom that they didn't even don't know. They've determined that the actions are done. I don't know. I've not used inflammatory terms of what happened. I've asked us to find the answers. The only way we find the answers is a thorough investigation by nonpartisan professionals. We've delivered that. We've been able to do it. We've earned the trust. And when I say that, the trust of BCA, and I tell Minnesotans the trust of law enforcement here. Everyone knows, globally, certainly here, that George Floyd, who was murdered a few blocks from this site, tore at the soul of who we were. But we healed. We built back trust. Chief Brian O'Hara came in and took one of the most difficult jobs in America of building back trust in the police force in Minneapolis after Derek Chauvin murdered George Floyd. And he's earned that. And he's level. And he's fair. And he's asking for that. And so, Minnesotans, I will continue to press that we be part of the investigation, that we do the investigation, so that Minnesotans can trust what the outcome is. I don't have a predetermined notion. Yes, I saw the video. Yes, I saw that. But a thorough investigation will see what happened before that. It will take all factors in, and it will come up with a fair and just conclusion. And we will accept that. Very, very difficult for Minnesotans to think in any way this is going to be fair when Kristi Noem was judge, jury, and basically executioner yesterday. That's very, very difficult to think that they were going to be fair. With that being said, Minnesotans, we've risen to the occasion so far, but it's going to get challenging. It's going to be challenging because I feel your anger. The human desire to lash out in this moment is very real. I can tell you that that is the wish of many people, that they fulfill the wish they want to see us turn on one another, turn towards violence rather than peaceful reconciliation, rather than peaceful civil disobedience. And we have to do our best to not play into that. I say this too when I saw yesterday some of the anger, whether it's Minneapolis Police, Minnesota State Patrol, Hennepin County Sheriff's Office, Minnesota National Guard. They are there to protect and serve, as it said. They are there to protect Minnesotans. Throwing your anger at them only inflames this situation. And I know some of you were up at the Whipple building this morning, and to the press who are here, I saw some of this myself. Thank you. Continue to have access to every single space. Continue to cover this story. Continue to show the world what's out there. I will say it where our president won't. The press are the defenders of our democracy. You need to be there. But I also tell folks, protect our Minnesotans who are out there and don't turn the anger to them. This is a brazen use of force. They want us to bend the knee. They want us to capitulate. The way we give them what they want is allow them to use this as an excuse to put more troops on the ground. Use them as an excuse to show that these are violent protests. And I also witnessed what I think is going to be a pattern over the next few days and the coming hours, is I saw an individual show up there with the intent to antagonize folks who were peacefully protesting, with a bullhorn to scream at them. And again, the desire to move on that individual is exactly what they want, because our respect for the First Amendment means we will expect and respect all opinions. If this individual is there expressing support for ICE, that's their constitutional right to do so, and they need to be protected. Don't allow that to be a catalyst to create violence. We believe in states' rights. We believe the federal government needs to stay out of this. We believe that the situation has gotten worse and less safe because of their presence. And I will just say there were two incidents yesterday I saw after this that just tore at my soul. I saw an individual at the scene identify themselves as medical personnel, a physician, and asked to provide aid, and an ICE agent said, "I do not care." That lack of humanity was chilling to me. And after this incident happened, and after the tensions rose, ICE agents entered a Minnesota school, causing disruptions at that school. I can't say this strongly enough as governor, as a parent, as a teacher, to our elected representatives, Democrats and Republicans, I beg you, I implore you to tell them to stay out of our schools. This tragedy will be magnified 100-fold if this fight moves into the hallways of our public schools amongst our youth. And they're watching us. They're watching us now, how we respond. So I've got a few simple asks. Let us, the professionals, handle this on Minnesota soil, this investigation. De-escalate this situation by removing yourselves from this situation with these 2,000 agents that were put here. And above all else, stay out of our schools. I'd like to ask you to care, but that might be a step too far for some people. But I know Minnesotans care. So we'll protest peacefully. We will win in courts. We will certainly win in the defense of our democracy because the American people see what's happening here. But the way that we don't win and the way that we lose, if this turns towards violence and allows them to escalate, it cannot happen. So I ask the grass-top leaders out there, the faith leaders, the folks who are on the streets, and in many times the true leaders are not the elected officials. They're the folks on the ground. I beg you, implore you, follow those words of the leaders we've had. I had the privilege of serving with John Lewis. And John talked about good trouble. I'm not telling you not to find good trouble. But I asked John many times, I said, John, I don't know if I'd have your self-restraint. Didn't you want to lash out? He said, yes, daily. But he said, I wanted to win this. I wanted to do what's right, and I wanted justice to prevail. And to do that, I knew the only way was to not lash out, to not give in to that. So to each and every one of you, we're not going to win this through violence. We're going to win it through justice. We're going to win it through compassion. We're going to win it through Minnesota ICE, and we're going to win it by holding every one of these people accountable as they should for what we've seen on the streets of Minneapolis. With that, I'm going to turn to Commissioner Jacobson to give you a situation update.
Okay, 3 things from Governor Walz in Minnesota that we want to touch on there. Number 1, he spoke about schools. Schools are closed in Minneapolis today and tomorrow as a precautionary measure. Number 2, he talked about 2,000 ICE agents. He mentioned that specifically. Now, this shooting happened after the Department of Homeland Security sent more than 2,000 ICE agents to the Twin Cities, Minneapolis and St. Paul, in what is described as the largest Department of Homeland Security operation ever. Again, that happened before this shooting occurred yesterday. And lastly, he talked about leaders who are on the ground, not elected officials, but leaders who are in the community. And we do believe that just in time, we have fixed the audio of on this video of some of those leaders speaking in Minneapolis with a sizable crowd gathered around them. Let's try this one more time. Let's hope for the best with this audio, and let's listen in to the city of Minnesota on the day after this tragedy.
A very in our community, for all the inhabitants
to urge the passage
community.
My name is Reverend Dr. B. Chavez Russell, Senior Pastor of Greater Friendship Missionary Baptist Church, a church that have been the staple in South Minneapolis since 1959. A church that was started because of injustice. A church that exists because we as a community recognize that we got to come together and stand against anything that does not represent God. In John chapter 2, when Jesus walked into the temple during Passover, he became angry at the money changers and the sellers of the animals and the temple leadership for taking advantage of the people who simply just came to worship. In response, he didn't react in rage. But what he did was he intentionally braided a whip together. He braided a whip together to drive them out of the temple so that the temple could be used for its original purposes, and that's for worship. Now, the thing is that yesterday's incident made our community angry. And instead of reacting, that's what they want us to do. But let's be like Jesus and respond. Like Minister Janae Amari said, in righteous anger. And if we look around, and I'm from Mississippi, and what's so wonderful about the state of Minnesota is that it's so diverse. And all of us are from all different places. Celebrate that. I need you and you need me. And God has intentionally braided us together for his purpose and his will to drive out and turn over the tables of injustice, to turn over the tables of division and the tables of hate and the tables of untruth, tables that endanger our families and our communities and our futures, and replace them with tables of justice, tables of righteousness, tables of collaboration and peace and love and unity, so that we can all live out our God-given purpose in this beloved community. We pray for the family and the community of Renee Good that she was tragically taken from, and the community on this very block that we stand. And I pray we are provoked to our purpose of standing together for what is right, not in the eyes of Republicans, not in the eyes of Democrats or conservatives or liberals or this administration or even MAGA, but in the divine eyes of God, as we continue to continue to do the good work that God has called us to do before the day that we were even born. And God has called us to this moment and right now. So I need somebody to repeat after me. We are better, together. We are better, together. Amen. Amen.
Okay, so community leaders in Minnesota taking to the podium in Minneapolis. I want to take this aerial view of the crowd one more time. You can see people gathered around these speakers as they address the city. Now, we also have a White House press briefing that has just begun. Caroline Leavitt at the podium. Let's go live after that press briefing right now.
Increase in vehicle rammings and an 8,000% increase in death threats. ICE agents are faithfully enforcing federal law to protect the safety of the American people by removing criminal illegal aliens from our country, which is exactly what nearly 80 million Americans elected President Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance to do. Radicals in the Democrat Party are furious over this. They don't want our border secured or criminal illegal aliens being removed. As a result, Democrats are impeding immigration enforcement operations daily, creating extremely heightened and dangerous circumstances that make it nearly impossible for the men and women of law enforcement to simply do their jobs. Democrats are calling to defund federal law enforcement agencies who are protecting public safety. And Democrats are calling to abolish ICE and defund the police. That will never be allowed to happen under this president and vice president. The Trump administration will redouble our efforts to get the worst of the worst, criminal illegal alien killers, rapists, and pedophiles off of American streets. The Department of Homeland Security will continue to operate on the ground in Minnesota, not only to remove criminal illegal aliens, but also to continue conducting door-to-door investigations of the rampant fraud that has taken place in the state under the failed and corrupt leadership of Democrat Governor Tim Walz. Taxpayers have been ripped off to the tune of billions of dollars in this one state alone, and that is going to end, and people are going to be held accountable. The Trump administration has activated thousands of federal agents, doubled the number of U.S. attorneys in the DOJ office in Minneapolis, and surged resources to hold fraudsters accountable and demand justice for law-abiding American taxpayers and citizens across our country. And that's what brings the Vice President out here with me today to discuss all the Trump administration is doing and to make an additional important announcement on this front. So please, Mr. Vice President, will be joining us now. Thank you.
Great. Well, good afternoon, everybody. And I want to echo some of what Carolyn said about what we're doing to combat the rampant fraud that exists in our immigration system thanks to failed politicians and thanks to people who allowed the American taxpayer to be taken advantage of for far too long. I think it's important to understand why this matters to the American people. I am a father of 3 young kids, a lot of people in my generation. What is that going on there? Is that normal? Okay. CNN installed this broken camera just to throw me off my game, but it's not going to work. So here's the simple fact here. If you're a young parent struggling to afford childcare in the United States of America, there are programs that we have to make it easier for your kids to get in daycare, for your kids to get in preschool. Those programs should go to American citizens, not be defrauded by Somali immigrants and others. Make it hard for you to get the access to the resources you need. But number 2, making it easier for people who shouldn't even be in this country to fleece the United States and our taxpayers to begin with. We have actually activated a major interagency task force to make it possible to get to the heart of this fraud. We have Department of Agriculture resources that are focused on SNAP fraud so that people who need food benefits can get them, but illegal aliens and other fraudsters don't. We have over 1,500 subpoenas that the Department of Justice has issued to get to the heart of the fraud ring. We've done almost 100 indictments, mostly Somali immigrants, but also a few others. And of course, we're looking in with broad investigatory authority to a number of the instances of wrongdoing that we've seen in Minneapolis. But we also want to expand this. We know that the fraud isn't just happening in Minneapolis, it's also happening in states like Ohio. It's happening in states like California. And so what we're doing in order to help coordinate this remarkable interagency effort from the Trump administration, but also to make sure that we prosecute the bad guys and do it as swiftly and efficiently as possible, is we are creating a new Assistant Attorney General position who will have nationwide jurisdiction over the issue of fraud. Now, of course, that person's efforts will start and focus primarily in Minnesota, but it is going to be a nationwide effort because, unfortunately, the American people have been defrauded in a very nationwide way. I want to thank a couple of people for their cooperation, in particular Pam Bondi, our Attorney General, first of all, for getting a lot of resources to Minneapolis to start to investigate and prosecute this fraud, really at an industrial scale. We've never seen fraud like this in the history of our country. Pam has been doing a great job to get the resources there to uncover it, but importantly, creating a job like this often takes months, sometimes even longer. When we realized that we needed this Associate Attorney General position, Pam got this person up and running in about a week. We're going to make the nomination hopefully in the next few days. We'll obviously let you guys know who that is when we do it. I've talked to Senate Majority Leader John Thune, who has promised me swift confirmation for this official, but this is the person who is going to make sure that we stop defrauding the American people. Here's one final thing I'll say about this. I've heard a lot of people say that we need a special counsel to investigate fraud in the United States of America. I actually agree, and that's what this position does. It has all the benefits, all the resources, all the authority of a special counsel, but with 2 crucial differences. Number 1, it will be run out of the White House under the supervision of me and the President of the United States. And number 2, it's actually constitutionally legitimate. As you guys may know, the special counsel statute has some major constitutional questions. When we get the bad guys, we want to make sure we get them permanently and they don't have some legal technicality they can get out of, which is why we set it up as an Associate Attorney General. I'll take some questions, but I want to make just one final observation here. When I was actually walking out here, somebody sent me a photo of a CNN headline about what happened in Minneapolis. And this is the headline. I'm just going to read it. Outrage after ICE officer kills U.S. citizen in Minneapolis. Well, that's one way to put it, and that is the way that many people in the corporate media have put this attack over the last 24 hours. And I say attack very, very intentionally because this was an attack on federal law enforcement. This was an attack on law and order. This was an attack on the American people. The way that the media, by and large, has reported this story has been an absolute disgrace, and it puts our law enforcement officers at risk every single day. What that headline leaves out is the fact that that very ICE officer nearly had his life ended, dragged by a car 6 months ago, 33 stitches in his leg. So you think maybe he's a little bit sensitive about somebody ramming him with an automobile? What that headline leaves out is that that woman was there to interfere with a legitimate law enforcement operation in the United States of America. What that headline leaves out is that that woman is part of a broader left-wing network to attack, to dox, to assault and to make it impossible for our ICE officers to do their job. If the media wants to tell the truth, they ought to tell the truth that a group of left-wing radicals have been working tirelessly, sometimes using domestic terror techniques to try to make it impossible for the President of the United States to do what the American people elected him to do, which is enforce our immigration laws. The President stands with ICE, I stand with ICE, we stand with all of our law enforcement officers. And part of that is recognizing that you people in the media, not everybody in this room, but many people in this room have been lying about this attack. She was trying to ram this guy with her car. He shot back. He defended himself. He's already been seriously wounded in law enforcement operations before, and everybody who's been repeating the lie that this is some innocent woman who was out for a drive in Minneapolis when a law enforcement officer shot at her, you should be ashamed of yourselves. Every single one of you. Questions?
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I wanted to read a quote from Tim Walz earlier today. He said, "When things looked bleak, it was Minnesota's first that held the line for the nation on July 3rd, 1863, and I think we may be in that moment now." Can you comment on his rhetoric and Mayor Jacob Frey and whether they want to see unrest in Minneapolis?
Well, that's very tough rhetoric from a guy who just quit because his fraudulent activities have been uncovered. Look, Tim Walz is a joke. His entire administration has been a joke. The idea that he's some sort of freedom fighter, he's not. He's a guy who has enabled fraud and maybe, in fact, has participated in fraud. That's what this new Assistant Attorney General position is going to find out. I don't care what Tim Walz says. I care about getting to the bottom of this fraud for the American people, and I care about enforcing the nation's immigration laws. That's what we're going to stay focused on.
On a related question here, I mean, Democrats have accused ICE of murder. They've said they're targeting Americans. They've told ICE to get the F out of Minnesota. This is going to stoke the fire against ICE agents. And you're talking about ICE agents right now and being concerned about them. What, if anything, is the administration going to do to make sure these folks are protected during these protests? But also, should DHS sort of revisit their procedures here? I mean, nobody wants to see an American killed. Are there changes that need to be made to make sure something like this doesn't happen again?
Look, first of all, of course, nobody wants an American citizen to be killed. This is absolutely a tragedy, but it's a tragedy of the making of the far left. They have radicalized a very small segment of the population, taught them that ICE agents are engaging in wide-scale violation of people's rights. What our ICE officers are doing is deporting the millions of criminal aliens that were let in during the Biden administration. So number one, we have to say, as a matter of leadership, and I would appreciate if the Democrats would join me on this, let's be honest about the fact that we have way too many illegal aliens in this country. Our ICE officers should be supported in doing their job. You're trying to actually marshal the far left lunatic fringe to engage in doxing, to try to make it impossible for them to enforce the law, and in some cases actually to engage in acts of domestic terrorism against our law enforcement officers. When you talk about different plans, different protocols, different policies, I forget exactly how you asked the question. Here's the simple fact. What we're going to do is make it easier for the American people's administration to enforce the American people's law. And that means that Democrats have to stop rallying the mob against legitimate law enforcement operations, and that means that we are going to get tougher, and that's what this AAG position is about. We're going to get tougher at the people who are defrauding the United States by inciting violence against our law enforcement officers. That's one of the things that we're going to do. We've already started that work at the Department of Justice, but we're going to keep on doing it, and this new AAG position is going to kick that into high gear.
Vice President Vance, you just suggested that this woman who was killed, Renee Good, is part of a broader left-wing network. Who do you think is behind this broader left-wing network?
Well, it's one of the things we're going to have to figure out, but here's the way that I put it. When somebody throws a brick at an ICE agent, or somebody tries to run over an ICE agent, who paid for the brick? And who told protesters to show up and engage in violent activity against our law enforcement officers? You see, just with this most recent terrible incident in Minneapolis, you see friends of this woman's or other people who are eyewitnesses saying basically that she was there to engage in obstruction of a legitimate law enforcement operation. How did she get there? How did she learn about this? There's an entire network, and frankly, some of the media are participating in it, that is trying to incite violence against our law enforcement officers. It's ridiculous, it's preposterous, and part of our investigatory work is getting to the bottom of it. Who's funding it? Who's supporting it? Who's cheerleading it? And of course, if there's illegal activity related to that, we're going to get to the bottom of that and prosecute it where we can.
Mr. Vice President, thank you for taking questions today. Is there a risk with you describing her as a deranged leftist, talking about very specific facts of these events, when an investigation is just beginning, are you preempting a thorough investigation by drawing such conclusions? And have you received any information beyond the videos we've seen publicly about this individual, her specific acts, that has informed your point of view?
Well, first of all, the Department of Justice is going to investigate this. The Department of Homeland Security is already investigating this. But the simple fact is, what you see is what you get in this case. You have a woman who is trying to obstruct a legitimate law enforcement operation. Nobody debates that. You have a woman who aimed her car at a law enforcement officer and pressed on the accelerator. Nobody debates that. I can believe that her death is a tragedy while also recognizing that it's a tragedy of her own making and a tragedy of the far left who has marshaled an entire movement, a lunatic fringe against our law enforcement officers. I think what is clearly happening here, and it's going to keep on happening unless the Democrats wake up and say, you know what, you don't have to agree with our immigration policies. You don't have to agree with what the president or the vice president believe about immigration enforcement, but why don't you take this to the ballot box? Why don't you vote? Why don't you organize? Instead, what some of them are doing is encouraging people to get violent with our law enforcement officials. It's disgraceful, and it's got to stop.
Just to follow up on that question, and again, thank you for taking questions, Mr. Vice President. There's clearly a lot of emotion in Minnesota, across the country, over this incident. You're calling Renee Good a deranged leftist. There's been heated rhetoric that we've also heard from officials. What responsibility do you and the president have to diffuse some of the tension that we are seeing play out in Minnesota, bring down the temperature as this investigation is unfolding?
What we have a responsibility to do is to protect the people who are enforcing the law and protect the country writ large. Whether you're Democrat or Republican, you deserve to have the people's laws enforced in the United States of America. Now, again, I'm not happy that this woman lost her life. I'm not happy that this woman was there at a protest violating the law by interfering with a law enforcement action. I think that we can all recognize that the best way to turn down the temperature is to tell people to take their concerns about immigration policy to the ballot box. Stop assaulting and stop inciting violence against our law enforcement officers. That's the best way to take down the temperature. And we're not going to give in to terrorism on this. And that's exactly what's happening. People trying to antagonize, to commit acts of violence. They throw bricks at them. Sometimes they shoot at them. Sometimes they dox them. Sometimes they go to their place of residence and harass their families. This is classic terrorism. And we cannot say that when a far left fringe is inciting violence against our brave law enforcement officials, that we're no longer going to enforce the law. That's rewarding the very people who are engaged in this garbage. The actual reward that they just got is a new assistant attorney general who is going to prosecute and investigate this stuff even more aggressively than before.
Yeah. Thanks for taking my question. So the head of Minnesota's investigations agency says that the U.S. Attorney's Office has essentially cut off the state investigations agency's access to the investigation. What is the precedent for that, and why shouldn't the Minnesota officials on the ground have access and evidence to work on this investigation?
First of all, I wish the state officials in Minnesota would investigate why you have so many people who are using their vehicles and other means to actually interfere with a legitimate law enforcement operation. The precedent here is very simple. You have a federal law enforcement official engaging in federal law enforcement action. That's a federal issue. That guy is protected by absolute immunity. He was doing his job. The idea that Tim Walz and a bunch of radicals in Minneapolis are going to go after and make this guy's life miserable because he was doing the job that he was asked to do is preposterous. The unprecedented thing is the idea that a local official can actually prosecute a federal official with absolute immunity. I've never seen anything like that. It would get tossed out by a judge. So what I'd like Minnesota to focus on is the real issue that they're encouraging people. Minneapolis officials are encouraging people to commit violence against ICE officials. It's ridiculous. It's got to stop. Go ahead.
Mr. President, thank you. You said earlier that there's a left-wing network to attack, to dox, to assault, and make it impossible for ICE officers to do their job. You told my colleague just now that there's an investigation going on into that network.
Yep.
So if everything that you say is true, how does being part of that network justify being shot?
Well, being part of the network doesn't justify being shot, but ramming an ICE officer with your car, that's what justifies being shot. It's not a good thing, by the way, but when you force somebody to engage in self-defense, it's almost a preposterous question. I'm not saying that funding some of this stuff justifies capital punishment. Nobody would suggest that. The reason this woman is dead is because she tried to ram somebody with her car and that guy acted in self-defense. That is why she lost her life, and that is the tragedy. Now, there may be other violations of the law and other penalties that are associated with those violations of the law. For example, if you are funding violence against our law enforcement officers, I'm not a prosecutor. My guess is that's not the sort of thing that earns capital punishment, but it should sure as hell earn you a few years in prison if you're funding the effort to try to assault our law enforcement officers. I'm sorry, guys, what's going on here? You guys are meant to report the truth. How have you let yourself become agents of propaganda of a radical fringe that's making it harder for us to enforce our laws? You just asked me a question that presumed that the reason why this woman died is because she was engaged in legitimate protest. She tried to run somebody over with her car, and the guy defended himself when that happened. Next question.
The investigation is still ongoing.
I said next question.
Mr. Vice President, I mean, you presumably watched the video yourself. There's not the slightest doubt in your mind, having viewed it, that the victim, you still believe that she deliberately tried to ram him despite seeing this video?
Look, I don't know what is in a person's heart or in a person's head, and obviously we're not going to get the chance to ask this woman what was going on. What I am certain of is that she violated the law. What I'm certain of is that officer had every reason to think that he was under very serious threat for injury or in fact, his life. What I'm certain of is that she accelerated in a way where she ran into the guy. I don't know what was in her heart and what was in her head, but I know that she violated the law, and I know that officer was acting in self-defense. It raises an interesting point, though. Look, if people want to say that we should have a legitimate debate about, what was she really doing, right? Was she panicking when she drove into this officer, or was she actually trying to ram him? That's a reasonable conversation. What's not reasonable is for so many of you to plaster all over the media that this was an innocent woman and that the ICE agent committed murder, which is what many of you have said explicitly and some of you have said implicitly. That's what I have an objection to. The idea that this was not justified is absurd, and I think everybody knows it in their heart. Yeah.
Mr. Vice President,
in the green jacket.
Taking down the temperature, it seems like political violence is ratcheting up and riots could be around the corner. What steps does the administration have planned to try to unite America? Average people on both political sides are so tired of fighting with each other, and I think all the journalists in this room could agree with me that we don't want to be part of the problem. Do you have any words to unite America?
I know you don't want to be a part of the problem, and I think that's true of a lot of you. I'm not sure it's true for everybody, because the reporting over this has been one of the biggest scandals I've ever seen in media. I've never seen a case so misrepresented and misreported when you have a guy who is defending himself and is now being treated as some sort of federal assassin by so many of the people in this room. First of all, let me say about crime. You mentioned violence. One of the things we're proudest about is that you saw violent crime over the last year drop by 20%. Why is that drop by 20%? Is it because we're attacking our law enforcement officers, or is it because we in the administration are empowering our law enforcement officers to enforce the law? I think that's one of the ways you take down the temperature, is you make people feel more secure and safe in their person and property. That's why we care so much about protecting our law enforcement, because it accrues to the benefit of the entire national community. I think that we can absolutely talk about the ways in which we can lower the temperature by discussing differences in a reasonable and rational way. Again, I'm happy to talk with any congressional Democrat or any of you about our immigration policy, about why I think it's necessary, about why I think it's in the best interest of the country, about why the President of the United States was elected to actually enforce the border for the first time in at least 4 years. So here's the problem. That's not the debate so many people are having. They are actively covering for people who are committing acts of violence against federal law enforcement. It is preposterous. The way to take down the temperature is to stop it. Have your debates about policy. Attack me. Attack the President of the United States. Don't attack our law enforcement officers. They are trying to do the job the American people demanded that they do. They are not policy actors. They are enforcing the law. They should be treated with a modicum of dignity and respect. And the fact that they're not is why incidents like yesterday happened. The one final point I'll make about this is, look, there's a part of me that feels very, very sad for this woman, not just because she lost her life, but because I think she is a victim of left-wing ideology. What young mother shows up and decides they're going to throw their car in front of ICE officers who are enforcing legitimate law? You've got to be a little brainwashed to get to that point to where you're willing, not just to protest, that's fine, not peacefully protest, but throw your vehicle in front of legitimate law enforcement officers and drive your car into them. To get to that point, you have to be, I think, radicalized in a very, very sad way. I certainly wish that she hadn't got there. I know there's an ICE officer right now who very much wishes he was not put in the position where he had to fire a gun to defend his own life. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. What's your message, following up on that, what's your message to the leaders in Minnesota, the governor of Minnesota, the mayor of Minneapolis, to calm down the situation on the ground, on the streets? What's your message also to those protesters who saw that video in a completely different way than you saw that video?
Well, first of all, I think if you watch every angle of that video, there is one angle where if you squint, you can maybe tell yourself that it's not clear what happened. But when you look at all angles of that video, it is very clear that her vehicle went right for the guy. She actually collided with him. And then that's, of course, when he fired his shots. That's obvious, okay? So what I'd say to the protesters is, by all means, protest peacefully, but make this about ideas. Make this about disagreement with our policy. Don't use your protest as a justification or an encouragement for people to go and incite violence and participate in violence against our law enforcement officials. To the people on the ground in Minneapolis, meaning the local officials in Minneapolis from Tim Walz on down, I'd say, look, why can't you just disagree with a given piece of immigration policy without turning law enforcement into the enemy? And think about, for example, a criminal law, where a police officer goes and arrests somebody because they violated a criminal law. If you're mad about that, go and protest the politician who passed that law. Don't attack the police officer who's just doing their job. We had a wide open border under Joe Biden. I happen to think it's a good thing the President of the United States has closed it down. If you think that's a bad idea, criticize this administration for a policy decision. Don't attack our people for enforcing the law, because I guarantee you go to ICE, there are black people and white people, there are Democrats and Republicans, they are patriotic Americans who are trying to enforce the law. Attack me, lay off of our ICE agents. Yeah, in the blue, all the way, yeah.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Vice President. You called on Tim Walz to resign. Can you lay out the case as to why he should step down?
Well, look, I think Tim Walz should resign because it's very clear either that he knew about the fraud in Minneapolis, he knew about the welfare fraud, or at the very least he looked the other way. I mean, this is not like Lex Luthor, right? This is not movie villain fraud. This is the lowest IQ possible fraud. This is, we're going to take the absence of kids and set up a daycare center where there are no children, and we're going to call our early childhood education center the Quality Learning Center. By the way, if you can't spell learning, maybe you shouldn't be in early childhood education. But people got rich off of this. We know that there were schools who either had no enrollment or at least they overstated their enrollment. Tim Walz, either it was unbelievable incompetence or he was in on the fraud. That's one of the things we're going to get to the bottom of. Sir.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Can you explain the difference between this Associate Attorney General and a special counsel? And do you envision this being a permanent position or having more of a limited scope?
Well, it's going to be permanent until we get to the bottom of what's going on. So I think it's going to last for at least the remainder of the administration. What's different about it from a special counsel is, if you remember, the Jack Smith case where the special counsel was found unconstitutional, one of the big issues there is that that person was not an appointed person, completely aside from all the other issues, that the person was a lunatic and that the case had no merit. There was a fundamental constitutional issue, which is that he had not been appointed by the president and he had not been confirmed by the United States Senate. An assistant attorney general, what that's going to allow us to do is appoint this person, have them confirmed by the Senate. That's one difference. The more substantive difference is that this person is going to be part of a very broad interagency White House that's being led from the President of the United States on down. And that's going to give him the resources, the access to material and information to make this person more effective. I think a lot of people have asked, how are you really going to get to the heart of the fraud? We've been asking ourselves that question for the past couple of months, and we think this is the critical piece at the Department of Justice to really ramp this fraud investigation into high gear. In the red tie, yeah.
Vice President Vance, I wanted to ask, what's your message to far leftist agitators who feel emboldened to obstruct ICE activity in Minnesota and around the country?
Well, I think they shouldn't feel emboldened because now they have an assistant attorney general who is going to prosecute and investigate their fraud and their violence more aggressively than it has ever been investigated in the United States of America. We are doing so much to try to find the financing networks and the domestic terrorism networks that legitimate this violence, that fund this violence, and that, of course, engage in the violence. These people should not feel emboldened because they have, for the first time, maybe in American history, an administration that is not going to tolerate political violence of any kind from anywhere.
Yeah. We made clear today that the entire weight of the federal government is behind these ICE agents and this ICE agent in particular. There is still a federal investigation happening on the ground. Does that mean that they are not looking into this ICE agent at all? They are just focused on the woman who was in the car? What is the investigation if the federal government has already determined that its weight is behind this ICE investigation?
So what do you mean, when you say investigation, do you mean investigation of the shooting yesterday or of the fraud that's happening in Minneapolis?
Yesterday.
Okay, look, DHS, as I understand it, has an investigation already ongoing. I know that other organs of our government are looking at this. So yes, there is certainly an investigation that's happening right now. But as part of the broader fraud investigation, a lot of what we're doing with the Department of Justice has already started. We've got over 1,500 subpoenas. We've got people this morning, actually, we're going door to door to actually knock on some of these fraudulent care centers, these fraudulent social services organizations to get to the bottom of what's going on there. So the investigation in some ways has already been ramping up into the anti-fraud element for at least a few weeks. What we're trying to do is supercharge it and make sure there's a designated person within the Department of Justice who completely controls that particular focus.
Yeah. Just to follow up on that, Mr. Vice President, on the agent, is he still on duty or has he been placed on leave, on administrative leave? And what really was the target of the operation on Wednesday? ICE operation on Wednesday?
Well, first of all, it was a legitimate law enforcement operation. We were going door to door to try to find criminal illegal aliens and deport them from the United States of America, because if you come to our country illegally in violation of our immigration laws, then we have the mandate, and in fact, we have the legal duty to enforce those immigration laws. Whether he's been placed on administrative leave, I don't know the answer to that question. I'd refer it to the Department of Homeland Security, and they can follow up. I will say, look, I would appreciate everybody saying a prayer for that agent. Look, in the past 6 months, he has been hit twice by a motor vehicle. One time, the first time, it led to over 30 stitches and very serious injuries to his legs. This is a guy who's actually done a very, very important job for the United States of America. He's been assaulted, he's been attacked, he's been injured because of it. He deserves a debt of gratitude, and I think the media prejudging and talking about this guy as if he's a murderer is one of the most disgraceful things I've ever seen from the American media. Yeah.
Vice President, what is your specific role in the future of Venezuela? And I'm wondering, could you confirm reports that the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, was kept out of the planning for the operations because of her past concerns about military involvement in Venezuela?
So I've heard a couple of things. One, that I was kept out of the planning for the Venezuela operation, that's false. And another, that Tulsi was kept out of the planning for Venezuela operations, that's completely false. Look, we're all part of the same team. And one of the things that is really amazing about that operation is that we kept it very tight to the senior cabinet level officials and related officials in our government, and we kept this operation secret for a very long time. I'm very proud of that. I think it suggests that the team works very well together. Well, looking ahead, what is my role? Look, my role is going to be whatever the president asks me to do. Well, every single, or I should say every other day, I'm chairing the meeting that we do on this among White House principals to talk about next steps to try to ensure that Venezuela is stable, and as the president has directed us to do, to ensure that the new Venezuelan government actually listens to the United States and does what the United States needs it to do under our country's best interest. So I'm going to be as involved as the president wants me to be. So far, that's been very involved, and I'll keep on doing that so long as the president asks me to do it. In the purple.
Yes.
Even
Mr.
beyond the war powers
Sorry,
resolution.
we'll go purple and then we'll go pink or whatever that is in front.
Royal purple. And then beige. All right.
Okay.
Are there any indications, you talked about the network, are there any indications that the lady who was shot, I know there are different reports from there, her wife said they were new to the area. Are there any indications she may have been a paid agitator, and maybe that there are others that were brought to the area, considering everything that's going on in Minneapolis?
I wouldn't say that she was paid. I don't have the evidence to say that one way or the other. What I do know is that she was violating the law. And if you just look at the eyewitness accounts, they were saying she was there to prevent the enforcement of the law. She was trying to obstruct a legitimate law enforcement operation. That much is obviously clear. The rest of it, of course, is part of the reason why we investigate this stuff. Yeah.
Mr. Vice President, even beyond the war powers resolution today, Congress has bucked President Trump on issues like tariffs. Are you concerned that President Trump is losing his grip on Republicans in the Congress, and what are you going to do about it?
No, I'm not concerned at all. First of all, we talked to some of the senators who were going to vote the wrong way, in my view, on this resolution today. Much of their argument was based more on a legal technicality than any disagreement in policy. If you look at the people who actually voted, every single one of them have supported the administration's plan. Second of all, as the president, I believe himself, has already said, every president, Democrat or Republican, believes the War Powers Act is fundamentally a fake and unconstitutional law. It's not going to change anything about how we conduct foreign policy over the next couple of weeks, the next couple of months, and that'll continue to be how we approach things. Go ahead.
President. So we are seeing, regarding Iran, we are seeing the protests in Iran these days. The cities are begging for help from the U.S. and Israel, naming streets in the city after President Trump. It seems there is an opportunity here that may not come again. Will the United States stand by the citizens of Iran? And if Israel decides to strike again the nuclear sites in Iran, is the U.S. expected to take part?
Well, look, we certainly stand by anybody who's engaged in peaceful protest, anybody who's trying to exert their rights for free association and to have their voices heard. Obviously, the Iranian regime has a lot of problems, and as the President of the United States has said, the smartest thing for them to have done, it was true 2 months ago, it's true today, is for them to actually have a real negotiation with the United States about what we need to see when it comes to their nuclear program. I'll let the President speak to what we're going to do in the future, but we certainly stand with anybody across the world, including the Iranian people who are advocating for their rights. I'll take just a couple more questions. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. Concerning Venezuela, how would you assure the Caribbean region that they will remain a zone of peace? Because some member states in the region are concerned.
Well, look, the president had a very productive phone call with the president of Colombia yesterday, and we continue to talk at all levels of government with a number of our friends in the Caribbean region. I actually think this is really good for peace in the Caribbean, because when you take away a major source of illegal cartel revenue, which is the cocaine trade, the fentanyl trade, other sources of illicit revenue, you actually remove the power of one of the main destabilizing forces in Latin America and in the Caribbean. I really do think, look, we say it all the time, this is the president of peace. One of the ways that you establish peace in your own hemisphere is to make it clear that the United States is going to be respected, that the United States is willing to take power away from criminal cartel organizations and give it to legitimate governments. That's how we see the future of the Western Hemisphere.
Okay, we've been listening to Vice President Vance for some time now. He spoke at length about the situation in Minnesota and then speaking about international relations there towards the end of that. Now, at the bottom of your screen, you will notice that we have a speaker who has just taken the podium at a news conference at a government center in Minneapolis. We are going to go to that live in just a moment. First, I want to go over some of what we just heard. That was a very long press conference and a lot was said. So I want to make sure that we do a quick recap of some of what we heard from Vice President Vance. In addition to talking about some of the specifics of that particular incident, he described the activity against ICE in general as terrorism. All right. He also said that he doesn't know what's in a person's heart or in a person's head. He also had statements where he said she tried to ram somebody with her car and that guy acted in self-defense. So speaking both about the broader situation with ICE and the specifics when it comes to that particular situation. Another comment on the specifics, something along the lines of, we could have a reasonable conversation to debate whether she was panicking or trying to ram him with her car. He also spoke about the ICE mission that was happening at that particular time when the incident took place. He said that ICE was going door to door to find criminal illegal aliens and deport them from the United States of America. He does not know if that particular ICE officer who pulled the trigger has been placed on administrative leave, though he did encourage everybody to say a prayer for that agent. He also noted that that agent had been injured previously during some of his law enforcement duties, and he also talked about the fact that how do I put this? That he has noted that the woman who was killed, Renee Good, is part of a left-wing movement and a deranged leftist. Again, these are Vice President J.D. Vance's words to describe Renee Good. Now, we have more details about Renee Good, the woman who was shot dead by that ICE agent in Minnesota, 37 years old and the mother of 3. She had just moved to the city of Minneapolis. Again, a mother of 3, Renee Good. We also know that there are protests going on across the country following her death. Again, 37 years old, a mother of 3 who had just moved to the city of Minneapolis. Now, we also can read from some of the BBC's reporting that she used to host a podcast with her second husband, Tim Macklin. He died in 2023. Those two had a son together who is one of her 3 children. She also had 2 other children with her first husband. Now, that first husband spoke to the media on condition that his name was not used. He said that Good was not an activist and that she was a devoted Christian who went to Northern Ireland on youth missions when she was younger. She had previously worked as a dental assistant and at a credit union, but mainly had been a stay-at-home mom in recent years, according to the Associated Press. We also know directly from Old Dominion in a statement to 13 News Now that she is a graduate of Old Dominion University, and she won an undergraduate prize from the Academy of American Poets for one of her poems as a creative writing student at Old Dominion University. So a lot of details coming out about the person, 37-year-old Renee Good, who was killed in this incident. And we will continue to bring you more details as we hear them, but we wanted to make sure that we did a recap both of what Vice President Vance had to say and information that we are continuing to learn about the 37-year-old woman who was killed in this ICE incident that happened yesterday morning in Minnesota. Now, I want to make sure that we have all of our bases covered in here, so I'm looking just one more time at my notes here to make sure that there is nothing else that I need to relay. With that being said, and if there is nothing else for the time being, we will now go live out to Minnesota, where there is a news conference being held at a government center in Minneapolis. Let's listen in.
Communities have been terrorized. Schools have been disrupted. Fear has been weaponized. And this is the predictable result of that recklessness. Renee Good was an American citizen. ICE is an immigration enforcement agency. Immigration law does not give ICE authority over U.S. citizens for immigration enforcement purposes. That fact alone raises profound and urgent questions about why she was targeted at all. And those questions demand answers. Renee Good was killed just blocks from where George Floyd was murdered. This community has already paid an unspeakable price for unchecked state violence. And we will not accept another name added to that list. We're also calling on Congress to act. Congress created ICE. Congress funds ICE. And Congress has a responsibility to exercise immediate oversight, suspend funding for ICE's enforcement operations, and enact reforms to prevent this kind of violence from happening again. We further demand the immediate preservation of all evidence related to this operation, including deployment orders, internal communications, and use of force reports. Accountability requires transparency, and evidence must not disappear. Today, we are demanding action, not excuses, not delays, and not media spin. We demand the immediate arrest and prosecution of the ICE agent responsible, the public release of the agent's name, full disclosure of all video and body camera footage, termination of the agent's employment, the withdrawal of ICE from the state of Minnesota, and the establishment of a victims' compensation fund to support Renee Good's child and family. This is not about vengeance, it is about the rule of law. When the government takes a life, the burden of accountability is at its highest. Silence is not neutrality. Delay is not due process, and lies are not justice. When a federal agent can shoot a mother as she drives away, leaving her bleeding in her car, and face no immediate accountability, that is not law enforcement, that is lawlessness. In this matter, the rule of law demands an arrest. Next, I want to call up Jaylani Hussein, the Executive Director of CARE Minnesota and a longtime advocate for racial justice and police accountability. Please welcome Jaylani.
We are here today. We stand as a community once again at a familiar crossroad here in Minnesota's history. Not nearly a little more than 5 years ago, Minnesota witnessed one of the worst police killings in this country, the murder of George Floyd. And today, nearly a few blocks away from where George Floyd was killed, Renee Good was killed. We learned a lot after the murder of George Floyd as a community, as a nation, as a country. And today we are reminded once again that we will not allow the same foolery, the same lies that we saw to once again occur. Renee Good was killed and murdered on the street of Minneapolis by a reckless, untrained, dangerous ICE agent. What we have been talking about for nearly weeks, what law enforcement themselves here in the Twin Cities have been echoing and saying, that these untrained ICE agents who come to our neighborhoods are not going to only cause harm to other law enforcement, but actually cause harm to our community members. Anyone who sees the video evidences that have already been out will clearly show that Renee, on multiple occasions, waved off other ICE agents who followed and passed her. And once these ICE agents were able to get out of the car, they began to escalate. They became to target her. And she knew that. That is why immediately she backed up to get out of there. She began her process to leave the situation knowing how dangerous these people are. And because they even themselves are untrained and the way they responded, she was not a threat. She was a peaceful protester. She was following the Constitution of the United States. She was observing ICE agents knowing what was going to happen to her. In fact, she wasn't alone that day. Other observers were standing around, recording, because we knew something like this would happen in the streets in Minneapolis or other parts of this country. And it did. In broad daylight, with multiple views, we clearly see a killing by an ICE agent that was not warranted. Not only was it reckless, but it was endangerment to everybody who lived on that street. To shoot in that manner to someone who was leaving is a sign that these people are dangerous. Not only dangerous to themselves, but dangerous to everyone around them. Let's be clear. no uniform, no badge, no federal agency. No one is above the law in the United States of America.
That's right.
No one.
That's right.
We must name the hard truths. ICE came to Minnesota not to enforce laws. They came to agitate. They came to escalate. They are looking for confrontations, not de-escalations. They're looking to kill people, not to arrest people. They are here because they have been sent by the President of the United States to target this community, to target our state, to target our political leaders, and to try to win back the narrative that happened in the past election. We know this is not about policy, but about political rhetoric. And Minnesota knows when politics becomes dangerous, the consequences are high. We have seen the murder of our state speaker, Melissa Hortman, and her husband. That's political violence that happened in our state. And today, the president is echoing that on the streets of Minneapolis. In fact, it started by targeting the Somali American community. The Somali American community, who overwhelmingly majority are U.S. citizens, overwhelmingly majority born here, but yet continues to target this community, to demonize this community, to scapegoat this community. We will not have that. We will not have that, and we will push back against that. Just earlier today, I spoke to a man who called me multiple times. I thought he was being picked up by ICE. And he was a person from our community. And he told me that he met Renee. And she was among the people that came to defend the Somali community. That she was known in her effort to speak up, to stand up. And that she was doing this out of her good heart, and most importantly, to take care of her neighbors. What happened to her is not only unjust, what happened to her is murder. We are living in heightened times. We know what is happening to our nation. And we know in this moment, the adversaries of our nation are hoping and praying that somehow this reckless behavior by ICE, the lies that are coming from the federal government, will turn neighbors against each other and will turn neighbor against neighbor, and to create riots and chaos on the streets of this country. But I will tell you something. We have learned our lessons after the murder of George Floyd. And I'll tell you the story that many people don't know. It is average people who stand up. It is average people who continue to stand up for justice. And today, Minneapolis, we are back again in another moment where we are asking every single person, you stood up, we need you to stand up. If you believe that Renee Good was doing good, then it's you to stand up for that good. In this moment, we call upon our nation. We call upon everyone across this country who believes in justice and law to stand up and tell the truth. There are so many people, just like after the murder of George Floyd, that want us to say what we see on that camera is not true. What we see on that camera is murder that is being justified by the highest office of this nation. We will not allow it. We will not allow it. Do not let these people think that politics is about the powerful elite. Politics in this nation is the people. This democracy is built on average Americans across this country. We are the people in the Constitution of the United States. And it's us that must defend our Constitution, defend our laws, and ask for accountability. Because if we do not get justice for Renee, none of us have justice. And we also know that delayed justice is denied justice. And in this moment right now, we know that BCA this morning put out a press statement saying that they are leaving the investigation. We are clear about our demands. We want every agency responsible for the protection of the citizens of this great state and city to take their responsibility. We do not believe in Kash Patel's FBI. They are not prosecuting anything. They're refusing to release the documents on Epstein. They're refusing to actually prosecute those who actually targeted Charlie Kirk and others. They are not an agency that the American public believe is going to bring justice. We know justice, it must be done by the local agencies. We are asking both the Minneapolis Police Department, the Hennepin County Sheriff Department, as well as the BCA and others. We have a United States Constitution, but we also have a Minnesota Constitution. We need to use the laws that are on the books to protect Renee, because Renee is all of us. Renee Good is all of us. All the people who have been standing and protesting. Our Constitution is being the question mark. And it is us. So we ask and everyone to call all of these agencies and demand immediately that justice is swift and that these ICE agents is not only prosecuted, but charges are presented. We know the FBI is going to act like they're investigating, but all we have heard from Kristi Noem and the FBI is a story that contradicts the eyewitness and the videos that we all have seen. Finally, I know how painful yesterday has been for our state. But I will just say this and echo one more time. I believe in this state, and I believe in each other, and I believe that there's goodness in Minnesota and Minneapolis. Last night, I witnessed the love on the streets of Minneapolis. I saw people coming in tears, worried, who came to the site in the vigil. And I know we are angry in this moment, but let's use our frustration and anger for change. Let's not let Renee Good's life and her murder be in vain. We are getting a second chance, Minneapolis, after the murder of George Floyd, to get it right. To get it right. No human should be killed in the manner that you saw Renee be killed. And no lie is big enough for all of us to be able to not contradict it. We know what we saw on that video. Renee was leaving and she was shot. This mother, this incredible person that we have lost in this greatest state of Minnesota and the city of Minneapolis, we must not let her death be in vain. She is no longer with us, but she left us a question, and that question is, what are we going to do? And it starts with accountability, and it starts with justice, and then it starts with us recognizing that ICE is not above the law, neither anyone is above the law, and we need that. So we are calling for all of these agencies to stand up. We know that in this moment that the arc of justice does not bend on its own. It needs all of us. If we want justice, we must be part of that call. We must demand justice by any means necessary.
Thank you, Jelani. Next, we will hear from Habon from Ayeda, Leeds. Let's welcome her, please.
Good afternoon. Yesterday, Renee Good, a beloved community member, a daughter, and a mother, woke up and began her day with the same intention so many carry, to look out for her community. That commitment cost her life. Immigration enforcement should never place our community in harm's way. It is a civil process, not a militarized action. And it must be carried out, without weapons or force that endangers human lives. When armed tactics are used against immigrants, many of whom are unarmed and simply trying to live, work, and have a regular day, that reaches not only individuals, but the entire community. The depth of this trauma is unmistakable. Minneapolis public schools are closed, a stark reflection of how profoundly our community has been impacted, and that's unfair. We shouldn't be continually be traumatized. We are neighbors, co-workers, parents, and the people who keep up our community and our culture alive. We are raising children, building businesses, and supporting one another. Our humanity does not disappear during an enforcement encounter.
That's right.
It is constant, inherent, and deserving of protection. Community safety means protecting every life. Without exception, we call for immigration practices rooted in dignity, de-escalation, and respect, and for an end of enforcement approach that rely on fear and violence. Our community deserves policies that keep families whole and allow everyone to live, contribute, and belong without the constant threat of harm. I want to send, our entire community wants to send our condolences to Renee Good's family, friends, and her neighbors. May her life and action be remembered in our city, in our state. Thank you.
Next, we'll hear from Michelle Gross, the president of Communities United Against Police Brutality. Let's welcome Michelle. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Michelle Gross, M-I-C-H-E-L-L-E-G-R-O-S-S. I am the president of Communities United Against Police Brutality, and I wish to talk today about the local connection to law enforcement. In November, Minneapolis Police Chief O'Hara made a comment blaming crime in Minneapolis on Somali youth. That comment was like throwing red meat to a rabid dog. The Trump administration ran with it, sending ICE agents to attack our community, and he has since been threatening to send troops in as well. Then, of course, since then, a social media slop broker manufactured a story about fraud that had already been prosecuted, amplifying the attack on the Somali community and prompting Trump to send in 2,000 more federal agents. The community has stepped up to this challenge. Every day, regular Minneapolis residents devote hours to documenting ICE conduct, warning our neighbors, bringing food and other goods to neighbors who are sheltering in place, and providing other support. These efforts have blunted some of the worst of what ICE tries to do. This is the real reason the agent killed Renee. She was one of many observers documenting their behavior. Other ICE agents have shown up at observers' homes or called them on their personal cell phones with threatening messages. Yet even after this horrific violence by ICE, the community continues to go out and do what we need to do to keep our neighbors safe. There are literally hundreds of people in the streets right now as we speak, driving around, checking ICE and their conduct. Yet the role of the Minneapolis police in all of this remains problematic. Back on June 3rd, the MPD fully assisted ICE by escorting them to the site of their raid on Lake Street and then escorting them out again. Since then, after the strong rebuke by the community, they have gone the opposite direction, staying very hands-off and stepping and failing to step in to address obviously unlawful conduct by ICE, although both the separation ordinance and their own policy allows them to intercede. In fact, O'Hara said that if they get calls regarding ICE illegal activity, they would be forwarded to 311 and treated as low priority calls. That's what he said. Yesterday, though, was a new low. MPD and their SWAT team showed up just after the shooting, but not to address or arrest the perpetrator, but to engage in crowd control and to escort ICE, including the shooter, out of the area. It does not appear that they even bothered to learn the identity of the shooter. This is deeply troubling. It's clear after yesterday that we're the ones who keep us safe, but we need prosecuting authorities locally to help us, because none of us can bring charges against the agent who killed Renee Good or the other agents who assisted him. And we're not going to wait for the FBI whitewash to cover this up.
That's right.
At minimum, that agent should be sitting in jail right now awaiting a trial. Yes. Right now. Rather than spin and lies from the White House, we need evidence and truth in a courthouse. Many people have asked whether ICE agents can be arrested and prosecuted locally. They can if they commit crimes that break Minnesota law. And many law professors have written articles about that. So yes, they absolutely can be arrested and they can be prosecuted here locally, and they should be. Murder is an egregious crime and it must be prosecuted. Therefore, we demand that the agent who committed this crime be arrested and prosecuted by our local authorities and in the community where this outrageous crime happened. Thank you.
Okay, back here in the live Impact News studio in the midst of that news conference happening in Minneapolis. Now, I want to go over something that was said by that last speaker, which was about Renee Good's activities at the scene, what she was doing that day, and that is the legal observer portion of this. Several state leaders have said that Good was at the scene of an ICE raid in the south of Minneapolis as a legal observer. It's a volunteer who monitors police and security forces at protests and operations. Their aim is to help maintain calm, deter misconduct, and ensure legal rights are respected. I believe that speaker alluded to something along those lines. That is some reporting by the BBC, which we also were referring to for other aspects of Renee Good's background. Again, a mother of three, a 37-year-old killed by ICE yesterday in Minneapolis. So I just wanted to touch on that. It also is, we're here on Live Impact News. We're going through all of these different press conferences. We want to present to you as much information as we can, but I think it's reasonable to note, again, the continued differences between maybe the press conference we just saw from Vice President J.D. Vance at the White House versus the press conference that we saw there from community leaders in Minneapolis. The differences are stark. The differences are clear in approach to this situation. And so that is something that will be a major part of this story going forward, it seems. And it's something we touched on at the beginning of the stream as well. So just something that we continue to note as we go through and we hear press conferences from various community leaders, officials, and members of the federal government. Now, again, it's local officials who are painting this, not painting anything. It's trying to find the words as we parse through this, right? I guess the best way to put it is that there is a stark contrast between how local officials in Minnesota are conducting their press conferences and what they are relaying to the public and what they are communicating versus how federal officials are communicating in their press conferences. You've seen the press conferences here on Live Impact News. So I suppose we don't need to dive any deeper into those differences because if you've been with us today and yesterday, you can see them for yourself. But just something that we want to note because it's hard to miss and it is fair to observe as we make our way through our stream today. Now, we also have two separate political events going on live right now. We want to touch in on some other live events that we have happening. First, we have in California, the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, giving a state of the state. You know about the State of the Union for national politics. This is a state of the state of California. Governor Gavin Newsom has obviously become a nationally prominent politician as well. So we're going to drop in and listen live to Governor Newsom right now. At the bottom of your screen, you can see that in Pennsylvania, Governor Shapiro is holding an event to kick off his re-election campaign. A number of different speakers have taken to the podium throughout the course of the last 25 to 30 minutes. So we also will take a look at that live event. Let's start with Governor Newsom, and then we'll move to the event in Pennsylvania with Governor Shapiro, and then we will see how much time we have left here in Live Impact News.
Recruitment and retention program.
We're in the how business. We're proud to be in the how business, and we understand something that increasingly people are starting to understand, at least people that are open to argument, interested in evidence, that climate risk is financial risk, that climate risk is becoming uninsurable. That's why in California, we're making our homes and communities more resilient to heat and fire. That's why we're working with our insurance commissioner. A lot of work to do here. Talk about grace. working with our insurance commissioner to protect homeowners from unpredictable rate increases and cancellations. We became the first state, you, together, we became the first state in the country to require insurers to lower insurance for home hardening upgrades. That is not the case in any other state. And in the last few months, this is important, in the last few months, 6 insurance companies announced their commitment to remain in or expand coverage here in California. Again, a lot more work to do. That was important. That was an important milestone. You saw it, Farmers and Mercury and some of the AAA affiliates. Important milestone. But more work to do. Fully implement the commitments we laid out in the sustainable insurance strategy, and more work to do to hold insurance companies accountable for meeting their obligation to insure in high-risk areas throughout the state of California. I want to end with this. I was down in LA yesterday, got back last night, and those insurance stories, they self-evidently, unsurprisingly, were front and center with those survivors that I met. And let me remind everybody, I think it's important. I want to remind everybody what happened a year ago. Put it in perspective. Between January 7th and January 22nd, 48,000 acres burned, the size of 3 Manhattans. 3. Communities torn asunder, Palisades, Altadena, Malibu, Pasadena's. Fires took the lives of 31 people. 31. Destroyed 16,000 structures. So on the sober anniversary, it's not only right that we honor the lives lost, but we also honor the lives of some of the remarkable heroes and leaders, the first responders and firefighters that faced unimaginable conditions. Some of you were there. You saw it. $16,000 at peak, 16,000 personnel working in the arena, the theater of fires, 16 plus large-scale fires. Remarkable. It was a firestorm, I'll remind you, in the middle of winter. Hurricane-force winds attached to a fire. What they did, I don't need to say it, you just demonstrated, it was miraculous, it was heroic. They battled these impossible conditions in the wind and in the dark, flying dangerous night missions over the firestorm. CAL FIRE, as you saw a moment ago, is in the audience, but you know who else was up there? And thank you for applauding the community groups and the business owners, and most importantly, and can you just stand up? And I'd ask you all to stand up again. The survivors of the Eaton and Palisades fires. Would you all just stand up? And thank you for your courage. Thank you for your resiliency. Thank you for your strength. We haven't forgotten about you. We won't forget about you. We said we had your back, and we mean it. Thank you. Thank you. It's always difficult sometimes to talk about this because we were in roundtables, Jen, members of my administration yesterday talking to survivors.
Okay, so that is Governor Gavin Newsom of California giving his state of the state. We just wanted to drop in. It's a live event happening now. We just wanted to take a listen in. Governor Newsom, again, a prominent national politician at this point, and obviously we have a lot of major national headlines today. On the off chance that he was commenting on one of those, another reason to pop in. We're also going to take a brief stop at Governor Shapiro of Pennsylvania's campaign re-election kickoff event. We're just going to listen in very briefly, get a sense of the tone, and then we will actually move on to comments from Senator Mark Warner today about Venezuela and the ICE shooting in Minneapolis. For now, a brief check-in in Pennsylvania.
In this Commonwealth, this was the birthplace of the revolution. And even though hundreds of years have passed since that first spark was lit, That flame has never died. I saw it in my grandparents, one a steelworker, the other a railroad foreman, who came here from the South to build a better life for our family. I see it in my wife, Blair, the best mother I know, who, I think that's my daughter crying over there, who somehow manages to raise our daughter, support our family, and show up every day to serve our community as Pennsylvania's second lady. I see it in my daughter Harper, who at 2 years old is already a force to be reckoned with. And I see it in my friend and in our governor, Josh Shapiro. Someone who has never backed down from a fight. Someone who spoke truth to power when politicians in Washington tried to force their chaos and dangerous policies onto Pennsylvania. And someone who understands that leadership is about responsibility and service, not recognition. When Josh and his family were targeted by political violence, when their home was set on fire in the middle of the night, I watched how he showed up. First as a father protecting his family, then as a leader refusing to let fear or division pull this Commonwealth off its course. That kind of service is exactly what this moment demands. And that's why I'm proud to stand beside him as his governing partner and as your lieutenant governor. Over the past 3 years, Josh has become more than a partner in this work. He's become a friend and someone I know I can count on. And no matter the moment, whether we're talking about how to support families across Pennsylvania or I'm calling him late at night when I need advice on how to get Harper to sleep, I can always count on him. And I'm here to tell you, Pennsylvania, you can always count on him because he's always been in your corner. It's my pleasure to introduce my friend, the 48th governor of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro.
Thank you. What's up, Pittsburgh? Y'all ready to run it back? Yeah. I got to tell you, it is great to be here with our accomplished Lieutenant Governor, a native son of Western Pennsylvania, and my partner in leading our Commonwealth forward, Austin Davis. LG, I just want to thank you for your friendship. I want to thank you for your dedication to service, and I feel blessed to have you as a governing partner, and I look forward to continuing to deliver for this Commonwealth as a team for years to come. Thank you very, very much. And I want to say a special thanks to our second lady, Blair Holmes Davis, for everything you do in our community. And you can let Harper cry all she wants. I love hearing her. Lori and I so appreciate your friendship, your grace, and by the way, your underrated humor. And I want you to know, we're hopeful you got a little magic up your sleeve Monday night to bring about a Steelers victory here in the playoffs. I know, as you all know, for me, public service is grounded in my faith and in my family. My faith has called me to serve others with empathy and a devotion to repairing the world around me. You know, I was taught as a young boy to look out for others. And Laura and I have tried to raise our 4 children with that same commitment to caring about the world around them. So let me begin by saying to the most important people.
All right, so brief comments from Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro for us here on Live Impact News. We did get to see his intro and the start of his comments there, but Senator Mark Warner speaking today, one of our 2 senators here in Virginia, about a number of topics, including the shooting in Minneapolis and the situation in Venezuela. We want to make sure we get to as many of those remarks as possible. So we've come out of the Pennsylvania campaign event, and we listen now to Virginia Senator Mark Warner.
thing that just happened in Minneapolis?
We've got the facility in Farmville. We've got another facility in Caroline County. We have a holding facility up in Chantilly in Northern Virginia. I worry that we're going to, with this huge ICE budget that they have, if they end up building more facilities than are needed, my hope and expectation is that we will have hit this surge number, and then we'll start to see these numbers decline as hopefully more or less people try to cross the border illegally. There would seem to be an intention if he's going to double or triple, and I don't know the exact capacity numbers they're looking at, that they may be sticking to their attempt to deport literally anyone here who's not got long-term papers. And that is very different than the claims the president originally made, which seemed to be we're going to go after the criminals who've broken our law and come here. If you start building these additional facilities in I think you said whether it was Fauquier or further east in the state, I got some real questions. I have not been briefed on that yet.
Our next question is from Brendan with Gray Media.
Hey, Senator, thanks for taking the question. You're set to vote here on a War Powers Act in just a couple of hours. Do you think it's a good idea to take some control of the military away from the administration? And what, if so, what is in this bill that you think would be positive?
Well, what this bill, Tim Kaine has really worked relentlessly on this. He's really been constantly using the tools of the War Powers Act to try to force votes, to try to just put Congress back into its constitutional role. This would require the president, before he takes any other action in Venezuela, to get congressional approval. And in the normal course, particularly when we're talking about potentially here, President and Secretary Rubio's words, not mine, they're going to run the country. And I think the president has even said yesterday he acknowledges it could be years because the Venezuelan oil infrastructure is so badly managed it'll take that long to kind of pick it back up. Do we really want Donald Trump on his own with no oversight running Venezuela for a year plus without any legal constraints, without any financial constraints? Could they spend willy-nilly? The War Powers Act would say you can't do anything else in Venezuela without congressional approval. I think that is needed. I think it's necessary. And I hope and pray that enough of my Republican friends will find their courage to do that.
Our next question is from Tyler with WRIC.
Good morning, Senator. Thanks for doing this. Kind of two questions in one. You mentioned that the officer or the ICE agent in Minnesota needs to be held accountable. What does held accountable look like to you? And do you buy the administration's claim that this was an act of domestic terrorism and the officer was acting in self-defense?
Well, what means held accountable is if this had not been an officer and it was the other way around and a bystander had shot an individual and with the same type of vehicle, they'd be charged. I'm not going to draw any legal conclusion. I saw the image. I saw what happened. I think there needs to be a thorough investigation. And if criminal charges are warranted, so be it. If there is the decision by the court that this was an act of self-defense, so be that as well. But for a community that, at all appearances, seems like it's on edge at this point, failure to go ahead and at least do that, put the officers through appropriate due process proceedings, I think would send a really bad signal to the community.
Okay, you could probably tell based on the framing of that question that we ended up starting this video in the middle. We started it at the beginning of the question and answer portion, whereas Mark Warner gave a little bit of a monologue beforehand, or he made his own comments before any questions were asked. Clearly, he spoke about the Minneapolis situation and Venezuela before even starting to take questions. So we are actually going to start this video from the very top. A brief miscue, one easily rectified. So let's go ahead and start with his comments before any questions began.
Yesterday. I think we've all seen the video. I think the officer needs to be held accountable. The challenge we have is, we've given ICE so much money. They have a budget bigger than the FBI. They have the budget bigger than, frankly, the French military. And it appears that in ICE reporting itself that each agent is almost given a daily quota of people to be wound up. And I believe that kind of pressure. I have no idea what the record of the officer who conducted the shooting, his background, but we do know, when you're trying to fill 10,000 new slots, you've got a much shorter time for training. You may not have the kind of ability to do crowd control, and it appears in this case that while it was a single shot, there needs to be a fulsome and thorough investigation, and everyone needs to be held accountable. It is, again, though, the bigger question is when the president almost always, over the objections of the local mayor and governor, puts this level of federal forces on the street in a confrontational mode. Oftentimes these ICE agents masked, as we've seen the data already, not just from Minnesota, but everywhere, often masked, picking up moms as they drop their kids off to work, or dads on their way home. Or I think the statistics in Virginia said that about 75% of the people who had been arrested had no prior criminal background. So the whole idea that the president said we're going after just the bad guys is not been proven at all. And instead, by this kind of, again, quota-driven roundup approach, you end up with tragedies that took place, similar to what took place yesterday in Minneapolis. So more facts to come, but the facts all do need to come out. On what had been taking up most of my time this week, and that is monitoring the situation in Venezuela. There was a second brief for all of the senators yesterday. I attended and received some of the same message. I want to say at the outset, I say repeatedly, Maduro was a bad guy, and Venezuela and the region are better for him being gone. And also, the military strike was extraordinary. I mean, I'm sure there'll probably be a film about this within the year, but the precision and timing of 150 planes and attack helicopters, the ability to have a staging area, the ability to get in, the real courage of the lead man on the mission who got shot repeatedly but still stuck the landing, got Maduro and his wife out safely. American soldiers literally were protecting Maduro and his wife with their own lives, by putting themselves between Maduro and the Cuban guns who were shooting at them. So that part is remarkable, but it's also just on plain face of it. This was a military action. It was not a legal action. And as such, as starts and spurs the War Powers Act that my friend Senator Kaine is going to put forward today, I will clearly be voting for that War Powers resolution. Two last comments, which I continue to make. One is that there is such a precedence being set here that if we can go in and snatch a leader of an adjacent country because we simply feel like that leader may have offended our law. The obvious comparisons are, Putin taking on Zelensky or Xi taking over China. People will say, well, Warner, Putin and China doesn't need international law to take their actions, but international law, is kind of feeble as it is, still sets some guardrails. This would sound like an absurd example here I'm going to give you, but what happens if the president of France decided that he didn't like the president of Switzerland? Could the French military go in and snatch the president of Switzerland? Well, you might say, that's crazy. That will never happen. I mean, that's as crazy as the United States government thinking it might invade a NATO ally like Greenland. We are in the kind of the period of the theater of absurd almost with some of these scenarios, but there is clearly a precedent setting here that removes America's ability to make a moral standing argument when it takes out a bad guy. In terms of what goes on going forward, I think about young people who are out there struggling to get health care now, which the president has not addressed, jobs because of the threat of AI. I got to really wonder whether the Gen Z folks really want our country to be spending billions, tens of billions, hundreds of billions of dollars protecting and controlling Venezuela, where at the very same time they want a job and they want lower costs. Because the ability for us to control Venezuela really is going to be dependent upon how long we keep the fleet, the armada, outside of off the shores of Venezuela. Our ability to strangle their economy is based upon interdicting the boats, because without the ability for Venezuelan oil to flow to other markets, Venezuela is bankrupt. I mean, we were told it's literally days away from not having enough foreign currency reserves to pay any of their postmen, to pay any of their street cleaners, to pay any of their cops. And while the violence level has been relatively low on the streets of Venezuela, if folks suddenly start not getting paid, you could have real chaos. And if you are running the country, to use the president's terms, what role would we then have to pay to restore order? And how, I know the president has said, we're going to go ahead and take this 35 million barrels of oil that Venezuela's got stocked in its reserves and sell it. That's not something the United States does as a nation state. We have companies that do that, but we don't do it as a nation state. So there's still a whole lot of questions to get answered. And again, reminding everyone that on Saturday the president promised Venezuela's oil is going to pay for this cost of this whole operation. Does that mean paying for the cost of the fleet to be for a year or two off the coast of Venezuela? We still don't have questions on that as well, or we don't have answers on that as well. And particularly that, what is this costing our country on a daily basis, are facts that I'm trying to ascertain as quickly as possible. Lots more on Venezuela, but why don't I stop there and go ahead and take your questions.
Our first question is from Mark with CBS 19.
Hey, Senator Warner. Thank you for bringing time today. Just want to take your thoughts on a proposed ICE detention center being built in Stafford. I know it's a little bit out of our viewing area here, but we spoke with Congressman Eugene Vindman yesterday about it. Just want to get your thoughts about that, and especially in light of everything that just happened in Minneapolis.
We've got the facility in Farmville. We've got another facility in Caroline County. We have a holding facility up in Chantilly in Northern Virginia. I worry that we're going to, with this huge ICE budget that they have, if they end up building more facilities than are needed, my hope and expectation is that, we will have hit this surge number, and then we'll start to see these numbers decline as hopefully more or less people try to cross the border illegally. there would seem to be an intention if he's going to double or triple, and I don't know the exact capacity numbers they're looking at, that they may be sticking to their attempt to deport literally anyone here who's not got long-term papers.
Okay, so unfortunately we have to interrupt Senator Warner in the midst of that answer. There will be more reporting on this particular press conference from Madison Schlegel on our shows today, 4, 5, and 6 on 13 News Now. That'll do it for Live Impact News on 13 News Now Plus. Another long day, but we hope to bring you all the information as we get it, when we get it, for 2 hours here every single day. We hope to see everybody tomorrow.